This is going better than I expected. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another devlog. Last time I talked about the concept of the minimal viable product, or MVP, and how that could look for this game, and I found myself really quickly making a lot of progress. Prior to working with an MVP in mind, I spent a significant amount of time on areas of the game that didn't need attention, and I was giving those areas way more attention than needed and neglecting the areas that probably should have come a lot sooner. After starting this whole MVP driven ideology, I guess, I went from basically having one usable room in the world to having the entire first biome done and in a usable state. Now, of course, the forest area isn't done, it's very far from it, but there's a few defined sub areas and a major biome boss that exists now. It really feels like I made more progress in a week and a half than I had in months. Lots of months. So naturally, I took a small break, mostly because I was making progress faster than I had expected, and to be honest, I hadn't fully planned out the next steps after the first biome. It was taking so long, I figured I'd get around to planning it when I got closer, and then surprise, I was right there. And while I would like the MVP to contain at least two of the major biomes so that I can demonstrate the biome or area progression through the game, I decided to take some time to flesh out some things in the forest biome just a bit more. The rapid progress I was making really helped me identify areas that weren't quite up to the level I would like to be at this stage. And I'm not trying for perfection. I definitely fell into that being a hole for me, but just trying to elevate the experience in a few areas a bit more. This is sort of how I accidentally allowed the player to turn into a complete evil monster, and it's quite possibly the best thing ever. And it all started when I updated the room layouts. Each room that the player enters gets assigned a template based on the room seed. There's only a handful of templates now, and the template is always chosen based on the biome you're in, as well as the sub-biome. For instance, the regular forest rooms always use a basic forest template from, the few that I've created, and the starting room that the player's in always selects instead from a subset of special templates, but there's only one of those, so that's why that room is the same every time. I did have to expand on this because I couldn't help but be bothered on how towns looked like exactly the same place as every other forest room, as well as the bandit camps and the ruins. Towns can have buildings that spawn in too, based on it being a town, but there's only a limited number of spawn locations for structures. And, two houses and a tree doesn't quite equal a town for me, even if the rooms get populated with NPCs. Towns in the forest will now have their own layouts. This is important because I can add additional buildings and pathways directly to the layouts without having to worry about the number of spawn points for structures. There may only be 3 or 4 spawn points for special structures, but I can still add in like 5 or 10 houses and give that whole town feel to the room. Now, when the player enters these rooms, those structures will be amended to the room structure list, which is saved on the game file for your playthrough. And those have certain attributes that are tracked and updated there. This means that objects, like the houses that I've added in these templates, can have attributes that remain even after the player leaves the room and comes back later. One of those attributes happens to be if the structure has been destroyed. What this means is that if you or any monster destroys those structures in a town, they don't come back, ever. You can raise an entire town to the ground now in your playthrough, and it will remain a pile of smoldering rubble for the rest of time. And as an added bonus, NPCs are not invincible either. Outside of being evil and ruining towns for fun, there are times where monsters or boss fights will end up in a town, and you as the player will probably want to do your best to save those buildings and people. After all, some of those structures that can be destroyed are the very crafting sites that you'll want to use to build better equipment. And I think that having options around how big of a jerk you want to be is always great. But what's next? Next is going to be the second biome for the game, along with some additional layouts for the forest area, some new enemies, new bosses, and just fun other stuff. While some of those things don't have anything directly to do with the minimal viable product, I still enjoy going back and creating updates and making things a little bit more fun for the areas I've already worked on. and I'm probably going to continue to do that. After all, at some point, I'll need to do that anyway. For the minimal viable product, however, the second biome will be the snow area. I'm going to try and be extra creative with the sub-biomes moving forward, so hopefully there'll be some fun surprises with what the player can encounter in the vast snowy wilderness. Let's call this an added bonus. There is something I've been wanting to point out, but I can't find a way to make it fit into the conversation, so I'm just going to force this in here and call it an added bonus. While working towards the MVP, you're probably going to see a bunch of sprites change throughout various forms, and I'll be dropping in and swapping out different placeholders as well. You've probably seen the crafting boxes in this video, and those aren't really complete. They're actually something I had created previously that still isn't a final form of anything. But why I'm bringing this up is actually because of this particular enemy right here. This enemy doesn't exist. This is the generic placeholder enemy sprite that I plop in until I have something better to do or have a better idea of how I want this to look. As you can see, this enemy has an idle animation here, a walk animation, an attack animation, and then upward facing, idle, walking, and attacking. These are the same animations that every enemy in the game has, with the exception of certain enemies that have additional animation sets. But this will enable me to kind of drop this sprite in for any enemy that doesn't currently have a sprite, and it's at least something, and I can make sure that the animations it has are working. This currently exists right now as the Stolum, or rather the ruins-based enemy in the game, and it kind of looks like it could be that, but it is absolutely just a placeholder. And for some reason, I am very compelled to point that out. But I also, as I'm talking about this, for some reason, really want this to be an actual enemy. But I think if I do that, I'll have to make it look a little bit better because as you can't tell if it's attacking or not when it's facing upwards is probably a huge concern. And I don't know, it's a placeholder, but I kind of want it to be something. If it turns out to be something, I'll be happy. If not, just keep that in mind when you see it. This is not the final form of anything, unless it is. No, it's not, probably. And with that, I think I'm going to draw this video to a close. I'm very excited for this new accidental feature of allowing the player to just be straight up evil and go through every town and, leave no building or person standing. It's not really how I like to play games normally, but it's a really fun option to have there, and I think it's always good to give players more options to do things that maybe they don't expect to be possible in the game. And let me take a small moment to thank all of you again for watching these videos. Even the people who don't make it this far, I know I'm not the best at making videos, but I do appreciate the support and I appreciate all the good comments and everything. It's really helping me keep going with this and really, really enjoying the positive vibes out there. So thank all of you so much. And someday, but not today, this game will have a name. Oh, and this time I will not have an accidental 4 minutes of silence. Probably.